Has Syracuse football improved its roster? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in a Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and of course, we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on this week's Bowl Friday, I asked you guys a yes or no question. Do you think that Syracuse football, as of right now, do you think that they have improved their roster from a year ago? So that's what we're going to talk about on this week's Bowl Friday mini podcast. I will start off the podcast telling you this. All right. I don't believe, as of right now, that Syracuse football has improved its roster. It doesn't mean that they can't win a lot of games next year, but there's a few reasons as to why I believe this is to be the case. And I'm going to get to the results in just a moment. But to be honest, this offseason, it was going to be really difficult to improve the roster regardless, because think of it like this way. Syracuse football had a really talented roster just a year ago, right? They have 5 guys going to the NFL Combine, which is the most for the Orange since 2019. They have Kyle McCord, Oronde Gadsden, LeQuint Allen, Fadil Diggs, Elijah Clark. And I'm not even including guys that were all ACC or at least all ACC caliber players a year ago that are not at the Combine. Jackson Meeks is the big one really here. I mean, I don't know how he didn't get invited to the NFL Combine. Offensive tackle Savion Washington. You got defensive back / linebacker Justin Barron. And also cornerback Clarence Lewis, who turned out to be an all ACC, I want to say 3rd team for Syracuse a year ago. What Syracuse does have going for them, this is a big plus, this is a big check for the Orange next season, is they retain their big 3 coaches, right? We talked about they lost Ross Douglas, their wide receivers coach. They did make a change at the special teams coordinator, bringing in Ricky Brumfield, replacing James Villano. But the big 3 coaches, your head coach is Fran Brown, your offensive coordinator is Jeff Nixon, your defensive coordinator is Elijah Robinson. Those guys will remain in their roles at least for next season. And coaching, if you recall, in terms of the on-field coaching, I'm not talking about recruiting, but actual coaching in game was the big question mark heading into last season. And I think we got our answer. I think all 3 of these guys can coach at a pretty high level. Let's get to the results. So it appears, based on the results, and there were about 250 votes this week, and a reminder, you can vote for every poll Friday at LO_Syracuse and on YouTube in the post section. So be sure to check it out. I post the question every Monday. It usually runs for a few days. Most of you guys also agree with me that Syracuse football has not improved their roster. 75% said no, and 25% said yes. Beyond just the fact that it was going to be difficult to improve based on last season because, I mean, they had a really talented roster. Number one, they made a concerted effort to get younger this season. Syracuse leads the nation with 35 high school commits. And oh, by the way, they could have 36 in the near future. I mean, they are in the running for 4-star defensive back Jakhari Flowers. He was originally in the class of 2026, but he reclassified to 2025. I don't think the Orange are going to get him, but I believe they're in his top 6 or 7, so they have a shot. And because they have taken so many high school recruits, they have only taken 7 total transfers this offseason. If you compare it to 2024, it was a much more even split. Syracuse took 26 high school recruits and 19 transfers. Keep in mind, there is still a spring portal window where Syracuse may look to add, and I imagine they will add 2 to 3 more transfers, but that's about it. I don't think they're going to go absolutely bonkers because you only have so many scholarships. And when we had on Mike McAllister last time, I asked him how many scholarships do they have. I think he said 3 or 4, if I recall, maybe. So they're not going to go out and get 15,000 or 15, I really should say, 15 transfers in the spring. They may only get a few of them. And there are exceptions to every rule. There's a reason why I'm talking about Syracuse getting younger and bringing in more recruits rather than transfers. But here's the rule, and there are exceptions to it. Transfers will generally increase your odds of winning for 1 year because they have a more proven track record. For example, a guy like David Reese off the edge that Syracuse brought in this offseason. He's their most recent transfer portal commit. He's got 11 sacks at Cal over the past 2 seasons. He's got a more proven track record, but it's only for 1 year. Recruits, on the other hand, they don't necessarily increase your odds of winning right away, although, that guy at Ohio State, that wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, he would like to have a word with me. But they generally will help you win later because they can grow within your program and eventually gain experience that the transfers have. Of the 35 high school recruits, how many do you think are actually going to play a substantial role for Syracuse next year? And keep in mind, when you get a high school recruit, that's taking away a spot from a potential transfer. And the answer is probably not many. There probably are not many high school recruits as true freshmen that are going to play a substantial role. If you think to last season, how many played a substantial role for Syracuse? A few. Murad Watson was a big one. Yassine Willis. There were others. Davian Kerr down the stretch played a big role for Syracuse, and he should have a big role this upcoming season. But that's my point. It's not many. And so Syracuse football this offseason made more of an effort to get younger rather than bringing in more transfers, which is one reason why I don't think that they've improved for 2025, but that could certainly help them in 2026 and beyond. And coming up, I'm going to talk about another reason why it's tough to say that Syracuse has improved, but it could offset everything if it happens. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. One more thing that I should point out before I move on to my next point about Syracuse football's roster for next season. Transfers can help your team beyond just one season, assuming they have more eligibility. So I just wanted to clarify that because I think I misspoke in the previous segment of how transfers can only help you for 1 year. That's not true. If they do have multiple years of eligibility, they can, of course, help you for multiple years. We saw that for this upcoming season, actually. We're seeing that right now with Deuce Chestnut and Devin Grant. They were on the team last year as transfers. They are staying on the team for this upcoming season. Let's move on to another point. Why it's difficult to say that Syracuse football has improved. It comes down to really one position, right? Quarterback. They're going from Kyle McCord to a quarterback competition. And there's a reason why we talk a lot about quarterback. And I get it. Sometimes it can get frustrating for people. Like, why are you talking about the quarterback so much? You hear it all the time, right? But there's a reason why we talk about the quarterback, because it's the most important position in football, and it's the most important position in all of sports. An elite quarterback can elevate talent around them. A good quarterback can be elite if you give that quarterback the right pieces. And a bad quarterback can completely sink an entire team's season, no matter how good your roster is. We don't know what type of quarterback that Syracuse football has on their roster right now. The next quarterback for Syracuse football could be elite, but we don't know, right? It's a quarterback competition. You're going from Kyle McCord to Rickie Collins from LSU, the transfer they brought in this offseason, Luke Carney, a true freshman, Jakhari Williams, a redshirt freshman, Rich Bellin, a true freshman, Michael Johnson Jr., a senior who was the backup quarterback a year ago. None of them have proven anything. They haven't proven to be elite. They haven't proven to be bad. It's a quarterback competition, and you compare it to last year with Kyle McCord, you knew that the floor with Kyle McCord was that he was going to be at least a good quarterback. That was the floor with Kyle McCord. We saw what he did at Ohio State, and yes, there were people that called him Honda McCord, and, he's kind of mediocre, but you knew that his floor with Syracuse in the Dome with that schedule, that he was at least going to have a good year. And obviously he exceeded expectations and he had an elite season. And when you have a really good quarterback, or at least a good quarterback, it's easier to give a win prediction. But when you look at Syracuse, it's incredibly difficult to give a win prediction for this team right now. I like to think in terms of range of outcomes for the Orange next season. If they have an elite quarterback, I can easily see Syracuse winning at least 8+ games in the regular season, even though their schedule is difficult, because if they had retained Kyle McCord for this upcoming season, I would have said they're at least going 8-4 and maybe even better than that. When I look at Syracuse's range, I can see anywhere between 4 wins on the low end, 9 wins on the high end. That's a big range. Now, that averages out to about 6.5 wins, which is between 6 and 7. Probably an accurate representation as to what their over-under is going to be when the odds come out. But that's my range of outcomes. And I compare it to last year. My range of outcomes was anywhere between 6 wins and 10 wins in the regular season. So they finished on the upper end of that scale. And keep in mind, last season's big question mark was, can the new coaches that they brought in, I understand they can recruit, can they actually coach on the field? Which I think we got our answer last season. It is yes, they certainly can coach. So overall, I don't really think that Syracuse football has improved its roster. It was going to be hard to do to begin with because they're losing so much talent. They also made an effort to really get younger rather than prioritizing transfers, which will help them in the long term, but it might sacrifice a little bit in 2025. But also quarterback. You're going from Kyle McCord to a quarterback competition. That's tough, right? And who knows? Maybe the next quarterback is elite and Syracuse wins a ton of games next year and they elevate the talent around them. Or that lower end that we talked about, which hopefully does not occur. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below as to whether or not you believe Syracuse football has improved its roster. Once again, this is Poll Friday. I'm Jackson Holzer. As far as what's coming up on the podcast, we got more podcasts coming soon. We'll mix in some football and basketball. The next basketball post-game show will be on Wednesday night. Syracuse basketball is taking on NC State at home, a big ACC game. That game's at 7 p.m. Eastern, and there will be a full post-game reaction podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait until March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. You can find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And I will see you all again soon.